We cover the test results of the 2020 Lincoln Corsair SUV, discuss the market for electric vehicles in this era of cheap gasoline, and with summer approaching, how does window tint impact the temperature inside your car? Next on Talking Cars. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode. I'm John Lincove.
I'm Keith Barry.
And I'm Mike Monticello.
We know that talking about cars, shopping for cars, sitting back and just thinking about cars, isn't really the most important thing in the world right now. We get it. But what we're saying is, we're here as a respite for people. If it's not the right time to watch an episode like this, save it, come back to it. It's here. It's going to be online. If you need a break from all of the things going on in the news and social media and such, feel free to sit back and watch us and enjoy it. We're here. We're going to be continuing to talk about cars, but we certainly understand the gravitas of what's going on in the world today. And with that, we're going to move into this week's episode. Our first news item actually comes as form of a question from a man, Anthony from Florida. And he says, due to the pandemic, millions of people are unemployed and gas prices are low. It would seem that this combination does not bode well for electric car sales, which already struggled before the world was flipped upside down. With a future that's now so uncertain, how do you think the electric car market will fare? And kind of the reason why it's a news item is we actually just covered a lot of this on consumerreports.org, and Keith was the person who wrote about it. So Keith, can you tell us a little bit about what we found and answer Anthony's question?
Yeah, so it really depends on the car. So we looked and found, prices are dropping, and to add to that sort of that bunch of things working against EVs is that tax credits are being phased out on some vehicles that have sold in decent enough numbers. So Tesla and GM vehicles are no longer eligible for federal tax credits. So those manufacturers are discounting their prices. So the Model 3, the standard range sedan, dropped to $37,990, and that's a $2,000 savings. And Chevy and a few others have put a bunch of incentives on their electric vehicles. So we found that most hybrids and EVs, because remember, hybrids also, people tend to buy them when gas prices are high and sort of forget about them when gas prices are lower, that they're selling at about 5 to 9% below MSRP. But we're also finding that there are incentives that could get people even lower prices. And some of those we found: the Chevy Bolt EV, 24% off MSRP. And it was, it was a little expensive to begin with for what you were getting, but 24% off MSRP, it's starting to look like a pretty good deal. One of my favorite cars, one of CR's top picks, the Toyota Avalon Hybrid, is down 15% below MSRP. It's an awesome car, and if you can get that kind of a deal on it, that's great. Ford Fusion Hybrid, Camry Hybrid, Corolla Hybrid, some of those are getting much, big discounts. But we're finding that people aren't asking for them, and you have to ask. And when you're buying a car, you have to ask in order to get all those discounts. The dealer isn't going to just give you that money, even though you're entitled to it, even though they're getting that money from the auto manufacturer in some cases. So, yeah, and that ties to some larger issues that we're seeing around buying EVs in the first place.
And that's one of the things that you touch on, and I know Mike had found some information about that, because the experience isn't there. You have people who maybe are fledgling into the EV market, and then they're going to the dealer who's the expert, expectedly so that the dealer will have information, and they're not finding that's the case, really, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's what you have is you have consumers who aren't, experts yet, a lot of them on electric vehicles, and they're going to a dealership where a lot of those salespeople aren't, necessarily experts on EVs. Salespeople could be coming, a lot of car salespeople, or who knows where they're coming from. They maybe were selling an entirely different product, and so they have to get caught up on maybe even they were selling a different brand before. So there's so much that car salespeople have to learn. But there is a little bit of a feeling that as much as automakers are advertising EVs and everything, that the dealers aren't either that great at selling EVs, or they're not that they're not necessarily pushing EVs as much as you might think they would. The Sierra Club did a study where they sent out some secret shoppers to dealerships all throughout the country in November of 2019. And what they found was that a fair amount of dealerships, the salespeople provided no information at all on things like, how to even charge an EV, as well as, a certain percentage of dealerships, the salespeople didn't provide any information on state or federal incentives. So, when you leave that stuff off the table, then and that information out of the hands of the consumer, well, it's going to be harder for them to want to buy this vehicle when they're not given all of the benefits up front. That, well, don't forget about this and don't forget about that, and look, charging isn't really that hard. You don't need to have a home charger, or maybe you do want a home charger, and this is how you would get it. There's a lot of things that they could try a little harder. Again, this is a broad study. It's not saying that all dealerships aren't great at it, but there is this some information that shows that maybe the salespeople have a ways to go on being better at selling EVs.
So, it raises a couple questions from me, and I want to hear both of your opinions, and I'll give mine as well. First of all, to go back to the first question, where does this leave the market? Is the market up or down? What do you guys think about it? And also, are there any ways that people can go and actually find a dealer that may be more attuned, better in touch with EVs? And I'll throw it to Keith first.
Yeah, I mean, the market has to exist for these. I mean, even if in the U.S. it isn't a priority, cars are sold globally. They take years to develop. Regulations existed before the current era. They still exist in Europe that are really encouraging these to be made. They still exist in China and other parts of the world that are large markets for vehicles. So these cars still have to get built. Their R&D's been done. The battery prices are coming down. The cars are going to sell. And if you look at it, broader world conditions mean that sort of decarbonization is also a goal. And this is happening. We're not taking our foot off the gas, so to speak. And to your second point, there are communities around these vehicles, because a lot of the people who are purchasing them early on are enthusiasts. They're the people who had to go out and do their own research, who were finding the dealers that sold them. So there are online forums and communities for almost all of these vehicles. So you'll find that there might be a certain dealer that specializes in selling EVs in your area or in your region. And you can go online and find out, from people in a forum who have bought a Bolt, a Nero, a Kona, to find out where these are, what dealers are doing a good job, which ones have them charged so you can test drive them, which ones have a good selection, which ones won't kind of wave you off and try and sell you something else that's gas powered. So that's where I would start, is searching for the forums.
That's the thing, is do your research first. And of course, consumerreports.org is a great place to do research on electric vehicles. And also, do your research if you can on the dealership. But if you show up in the dealership, if they don't have like EVs, one of this other thing the Sierra Club found was that sometimes the EVs were toward the back of the dealership. They weren't prominently displayed. Keith, you just mentioned sometimes they barely have enough of a charge to go on a test drive. So if you find that with your dealership, go to another dealership. You can go find another dealership that sells the same brand EV you were looking at. So do your research, go to the dealership. If it doesn't seem like they are all that interested or knowledgeable about EVs, go to another dealership.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it comes also just the typical car buying advice, the tried and true. Don't wait until you need a car. If you were waiting for your gas powered car to die and you're totally ready to move into EV, don't wait till that happens when you're stuck. The same advice rings true. I bought the Jaguar I-Pace that we tested, and it was very interesting. The salesperson said, it's the first EV I've sold. I don't really know too much about it. We've gone through extreme testing with it or training, gone through training of how to present the car and such, but it was the second one that they ever delivered. And that was only because the first one that we had, we wanted to switch into a different one, and they sold that other one out when we opted for the second one. So,
credit to that salesman for being honest with you, like, and saying, I don't know too much about it. I'm still learning. Let's learn together as as I sell you this vehicle. You know what? At least the person was honest with you.
Oh, and it totally is. It totally is. And fortunately, it was a situation where I didn't say, well, how do I get it home? I was a person who's knowledgeable, and we have our chargers and such. So it was good for him as well. It was a lucky situation that I wasn't someone who drove home and then said, okay, now what? That I bought it because it was a Jaguar and it was new and unique, and I bought it for our testing. So it's certainly out there. There's people who are specialists, like Keith was saying. There's the diesel pickup specialist dealership, and there's I'm the guy who knows how to order cars from overseas and have a factory delivery specialist dealership. They're going to be EV special dealers. And like Keith said, also, I think the market is not going away no matter what gas prices are.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some cars which there are still, that are still selling at a fair clip that there isn't a huge supply of because there is demand for them worldwide. And if they're not shipping those, there's a finite number of EVs that can be built at this time. And if Hyundai and Kia aren't shipping Niros and Konas here, they're going to ship them somewhere else. They're gonna change their supply chains to send those cars where there is demand. So it's it seems like things are sort of out of balance with car sales in general, but EVs seem to be getting back in balance.
So I think we're going to lift off and regenerative break on that topic right now.
Good one.
Oh, yes. You guys missed my humor in the many weeks I haven't been on.
Got to have the EV lingo.
We're going to move over to the car that we're going to discuss this week, which is the Lincoln Corsair SUV. And it's a luxury compact SUV. Ours is a 2020 Lincoln Corsair Reserve that we bought, powered by the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, 250 horsepower. It uses an 8-speed automatic transmission. That's the only transmission available with the car. And it's based on the equally redesigned for 2020, or the also redesigned for 2020 Ford Escape, which is a non-luxury version. And we just completed testing of it, and all the testing information is up on consumerreports.org. And Monty, maybe you could go into this a little deeper, but it's actually doesn't feel anything really like the Ford Escape. You would not know if you had the two next to each other and you drove them that it was based on the same platform, right?
Right. I mean, so this is a Lincoln and Ford thing that Lincoln typically takes a existing Ford model and makes it a little bit nicer, a little more luxurious. And I was kind of worried about, because it's one thing when it's a larger SUV, like a Navigator or something like that versus, an Expedition or an Explorer and the Aviator. But now you're talking about an Escape, which is a small SUV. And sometimes the luxury small SUVs aren't that great anyway. And so when I got into this thing, I was just expecting it to feel like a mildly warmed over Escape. And like you said, you don't even think it's an Escape at all. You would never know. I didn't even, basically, once I started driving it, I never thought about it again. It really actually, it drives really well. Like you said, it has a really nice turbo 4-cylinder. We experience turbo 4-cylinder sometimes can be a little bit raspy, can be a little bit loud, but this has a really nice subdued, I'd say even refined engine note. It has good power. It would have done better in in its overall score. The thing that's really dropping it down more than anything is that it has below average predicted reliability, and that's what really hurts it. There's a lot to like about this. I mean, it has a smooth ride, a quiet cabin, responsive handling. I would say mildly sporty. I wouldn't say sporty handling. It has an elevated driving position, of course, that we expect in SUVs, and it has this. One of the things I really like is it has sort of what they call a floating center stack. So what that does is it leaves this kind of cutout for the driver's right knee. And of course, center consoles, taking up space with the right knee is a thing that's a problem in many cars because they like to put these wide center consoles in there so you have plenty of room to store stuff. Because it has this sort of floating cutout center stack, there's extra room for your right knee. That said, some of our taller drivers felt this elevated seating position was too high and they felt, like they were too tall and they still bumped their knee against the center console anyway. And of course, the other thing, it's a Lincoln, right? It has a really nice interior. I mean, it has plenty of, padded surfaces, little stitched elements, chrome trim. I mean, it really is. It's a nice little vehicle, and I would say unexpectedly nice.
Keith, given that we've had Aviator and Explorer in, we had Navigator, we had Ford Expedition over the time. How did Lincoln really deliver on this model in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, this is just to echo what Monty was saying about the difference. Normally, it's the lowest level, the least expensive, most affordable car that gets the least differentiation when a platform is shared up against badges. And this feels 100% Lincoln. As a former town car owner, no, this is nothing like a town car. No, this is
not even a Mercury Grand Marquis, right?
Yeah, I took this. No, in fact, honestly, I think that the badge might be the thing that even sort of might hold it back, because this car is cool. And Lincoln, the Aviator's sort of getting it there, although the teething problems they had with debuting it and some of the early reliability issues didn't help. But I honestly think that if you were to put a German or a Japanese badge on this, that people might think it's a little cooler. But honestly, I'm telling friends my age who would never consider a Lincoln, who are looking for, they're looking at Audis, they're looking at Acuras, and I'm saying, give the Corsair a try. I took it down to Yonkers back and forth. It seems like decades ago now, but it actually wasn't that long ago, and it was an incredible highway cruiser. I mean, normally we always talk about how the sort of entry-level luxury compact SUVs are a huge compromise all throughout, and it usually is either in ride quality or in noise, that you're just better off getting a sedan, or you're better off getting the higher trim level of the less luxurious model. But this is a whole other level. The only thing is, there are a couple of oddities.
I was hoping someone would bring that up, because
there are some real quirks to this vehicle. I didn't, they were the sort of thing where when I first sat in it, I thought, who could ever design a car like this? But after, a couple of days with it, I didn't get too bothered by them. The first is the fact that there is a button for Siri Eyes Free or for voice recognition that's built into the steering wheel. And if you still keep your hands at 10 and 2, and your thumb is on there, it will press it. It's exactly where your thumb is supposed to be at 10
or even
and 2.
if you shuffle steer. If you move your hands as you turn the steering wheel, sometimes you hit it.
Yeah, and it's it's strange, and it's kind of it sort of puts a weird bump in the wheel too that isn't a place where you would normally grab it. I just find that a very odd idea. Now, I found it easy enough to miss it once I knew it was there, but it is one of those things you first sit in the car and you think, who did that? Also, some of the controls on the steering wheel, specifically cruise control, they don't actually show up unless you touch them. But it also means that that you can't figure out where something is by feel, and you can't look for it either. So it's as good as not having those buttons there when they're blacked out when you're driving. So it's just sort of an odd choice with the steering wheel on this. I mean, those are kind of the main issues.
And not only does it, does none of the cruise control buttons light up until you hit the main one, but they operate weirdly. Normally you push buttons with your thumbs, right? And this one, you actually pull to like increase the speed or decrease the speed and all that. You're actually pulling toward you. And so where you're pulling is actually not where you see the light for each of these things, and you normally would push on that light, but you actually pull on the backside of the steering wheel towards you, which is it's just strange. Again, it's something you can get used to. Along those lines of quirky controls, there's the Lincoln push button gear selector. And you push this, and because you have to push the buttons, it's not like a Prindle, as we would call it, where you get used to where park, reverse, drive, neutral, everything is. You really have to look over to use these buttons, and that's something we're not a big fan of.
I totally agree on the shifter, Mike, as well as a lot of people commented on the seats. And it seems Ford seats really are kind of polarizing with our group. Some people found them fine. Some people like me found that they don't necessarily support them best. I don't like them because the front of the seat doesn't pan down enough of the bottom seat cushion. So for me, it always feels like it's this high. we've had a lot of comments, and you can go on to consumerreports.org and read about our experiences with the Lincoln Continental, the Lincoln Navigator, the Lincoln Aviator seats. The ones in the Corsair, for example, a little narrow for people. Also, just for me, don't adjust again the same way. But overall, the vehicle really is a good vehicle. I mean, another really impressive feature of it is that as a luxury model, it comes with standard advanced driver assistance systems like forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, blind spot warning, lane departure warning, lane keeping assistance. These are things that many of their competitors, many of the German competitors, will just call it out as it is. They make it an option. They make it, well, it's this system, but you don't get that one, or you have to get the package.
Yeah.
Cadillac's another one. So, credit where it's due. The base engine, the 2-liter turbocharged engine, plenty of acceleration, great power, smooth, transmission smooth, car's luxurious. It's a very, very, very good effort. Like Mike said, reliability, predicted reliability. It's not there. It's not going to doesn't have a good prediction right now. Ford hasn't launched a number of vehicles recently strongly, and we're going to give it a year and see what our members say in our auto surveys. And when the new data comes out on this car, we'll see. Maybe it will bump it up to recommended status, because overall it's a impressive and it's a good vehicle.
Yeah, its road test score was actually pretty decent.
Indeed. So on that note, we're going to move over to questions. The section of the show, we love hearing questions from our audience. Keep them coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. Text questions, video questions, whatever you could send us. We're here. And hopefully soon we'll have another all questions episode, and we could really go deep into the mailbox, so to speak. The first one comes Nicholas from Tampa, who asks, can those of us unfortunate enough to live in Florida during the summer disinfect our car interiors of the COVID-19 virus simply parking them in the sun out of the shade? We've already had 9 days in March when the temperature hit 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Do we even need to apply disinfectants to our car interiors when we could bake our interiors every day for free? My parents live in Florida, Nicholas. I hear all about how hot it is even before summer, so totally understand. Keith, I think we did some stories about this, and you did a little bit of research into this question. What do you have for Nicholas?
Yeah, so researchers are still trying to figure out how long this virus can last, whether it's still transmissible. So we don't have any definitive answers for you. But Ford did some research with The Ohio State University, and they found that... Don't
say The Ohio State. That is so pompous.
What? No. And they
besides,
said,
Nicholas is from Florida, so you got to do the
All right.
Okay.
So either way, Ford did research with a school, and it showed that 99% of the virus could be killed on a car's interior surfaces by keeping it at 133 degrees for 15 minutes. Now, we checked with some of the folks at CR, including Dr. Emily Thomas, who does work on hot cars, and some of the sad consequences of hot cars are that children, pets, etc., left in vehicles unattended can die. And that is because cars get real hot real fast, even if they're not in direct sunlight. And if it's 90 degrees outside, it takes about an hour to get a car's interior to 133 degrees. It gets very close to that a lot sooner. So don't leave anything in a vehicle, especially this time of year. But depending upon the interior color, it could get to that same amount. Now, if you have a dark dashboard, if you have a dark steering wheel, the seat temperatures, if you have those leather seats or the fake leather seats. I remember getting into the Chevy Cavalier we had when I was a kid and wearing shorts and with the plastic seats.
Which is why you don't wear shorts anymore. Thank you.
I can't.
Burn yourself. Yeah.
But either way, sometimes those can get 180 degrees if the sun is shining on them directly. Now, there are plenty of reasons why you don't want to park your car in direct sunlight. And part of it is just the fact that it could, damage those interior surfaces. We've all seen cracked dashboards or seams kind of coming up on the edges. And that's a bad thing to have happen. If your car goes from 90 degrees to 180 degrees and cycles on and off and on and off, getting into your car, it's going to be hot. But, I would say if you're not sharing your car with anybody else, if you're not, working in a hospital, if you're not, coming out to your car after having been in contact with people who may have COVID, that, sort of simply washing down the steering wheel every so often is good. But the most important thing is to wash your hands. Wash your hands before you get in the car, wash your hands when you get into the house. And when you're driving, don't, touch the touch screen and then touch your eye or kind of, pick your teeth, or don't do that anyways. But people can see you. You're in traffic. They're looking. You're picking at your teeth. Don't do that.
Thanks for these driving tips.
I'm not getting in a car after you, Keith.
These are etiquette tips. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, especially if you're sharing the car with your coworkers. So yeah, wash your hands. The short answer is we don't know, but the slightly longer answer is it might help. It might help.
Yeah, based on the Ford experiment, sitting in the sun will definitely raise it to those temperatures and beyond, but don't transfer it into your car to the first place, and it's a nice backup.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let us know how it goes, Nicholas, and you might like one of the questions coming up, a little later in this episode. We have one from Andrew who says, I just bought a new Subaru Crosstrek. During the sales process, the finance person tried to sell me window tint that supposedly reduces the heating effect of sunlight coming through the windows more effectively than the standard tint. I declined the purchase pending some research. What are your thoughts? So, maybe Nicholas would like this response too. He probably knows a lot about tint down in Florida. But Mike, what do we find? I think you talked to John Ibbotson at work and a couple other people, right?
Yeah, these questions somehow seem related. I wonder who the genius was that picked them.
Dave.
John. Anyway, so I reached out to Doc M's, Dr. Emily Thomas, PhD, as we just talked about before, and as well as Jen Stockberger, because they're involved in our interior, heat testing, heat stroke, ways to eliminate heat stroke and deaths of especially children being left in hot cars, but animals as well and elderly people. Basically, anyone. You should really never leave anyone in a car that could at all get warm. Anyway, so she said that we haven't done any testing specific to window tinting, but she found a study by some researchers in Malaysia where they compared window tinting to doing nothing to the car. And she said the window tinting did reduce the interior temperatures. The window tints were from 65 to 85% infrared rejection for the front and rear windows. The researchers measured an 8.5% reduction of ambient front interior temperature with window tinting. And so she said, yes, it did make the vehicle cooler, but here's the thing. The temperature inside the car without window tinting got to almost 137 degrees Fahrenheit with no tinting, but with tinting, 124 degrees Fahrenheit. So the bottom line is it's still completely unsafe to leave anyone in the car for sure, but also showing that, yes, it has some effect, but it's still, even with window tinting in Florida, it's still going to get really warm inside that car. So if you do get window tinting, whether it's aftermarket or, if your dealer offers it, make sure that it is within the limits of what your state allows. That's very important. And sometimes they're going to even the state will require that there is a tag, some kind of a placard somewhere on the car that shows that this window tint is within the state regulations. So make sure you do that. Don't just go to an aftermarket place and say, yeah, just give me the darkest tint you can.
And front and rear also differ. Rear could be darker than the front side
absolutely.
Windows. Yep.
So what Jen Stockberger wanted me to point out was, remember, window tinting is going to, reduce your nighttime visibility. As someone who rides motorcycles, especially when I lived in California where it's sunny all the time, on our face shields, there's, you can have clear, you can have what they call a light smoke or a dark smoke. And I always used a dark smoke face shield in California because the sun is so bright out there. But at nighttime, it definitely does reduce your visibility. Jen said, she said, when you mention that it's like wearing your, she said it's like wearing your sunglasses at night. She said when you mentioned that, she said picture me singing, I wear my sunglasses at night so I can, because Jen's weird. I wouldn't sing it, but I could picture her singing it on the show.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, let's bring it back from hits from the 80s and go back to the original question. Is that Is it something that people should buy tint at the dealership? Should they buy it when they're in the finance office and it's already a stressful situation?
Absolutely not. I'm going to jump in there. Absolutely not. You should not buy anything that you're hearing about for the first time when someone is trying to sell it to you. So those words, I decline the purchase pending some research. Good job, Andrew. You did the right thing. So most of the time, dealers make a lot of their profit from that finance office, the F&I office, as they call it, finance and insurance office. And you kind of go in there and you think, oh man, I've negotiated a great deal. But then they might make up to $2,000, $3,000 off of you in that room because they're selling you sort of aftermarket things that you weren't prepared to say no to or even to say yes to. And also they're showing you maybe if you're financing the car, how much it's going to cost as part of your monthly payment, which means you might be paying for that window tint, which could be, $500 or $600, who knows how many dollars they're charging for it, but you're paying for it with interest over the next 3 or 4 years. And it just looks like a teeny tiny amount that, if we add this to your payment, that's only another $4 or $5. Who wouldn't want to spend? It's for the price of a cup of coffee. So don't buy anything in that moment. You might want to get it from the dealer later if it turns out that they're reputable and they do a good job, or if it's a particular car that's difficult to work on. But you want to do your research and asking us whether it's a good idea. That's, going to cr.org and seeing if we've written an article about it. That's your first step. Your second step is then finding somewhere reputable, local, who can do it for you and finding out how much they charge. Because chances are there may be an aftermarket place that only does window tint, that's near your house, that's familiar with all the laws and regulations, that does this all day long, and they might charge less. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Possibly cheaper than the dealer as well.
Yep.
Exactly. So,
and you can come back with that quote and see then what the dealer quote might change to.
Yeah, those are usually
part of
inflated
negotiation
prices. Yeah,
exactly. It is tough. People aren't always prime negotiators. It's an awkward thing, but you balance it out. If you're just saying, look, I just want it done, fine. Know what you're getting into when you're buying at the F&I office, or spend a couple days, do some internet research. I mean, this isn't the days of driving to tint places and having them look at your car. This is go online, find reviews, look online, see what people look for red flags, and then, maybe visit one. So it's certainly a good idea in that, like Mike said, it does lower the temperature. It doesn't mean you can leave your chocolates sitting in the back seat all day, and the tint will keep the car nice and frosty. But it definitely will not age the interior, like we were talking about, previous question. It'll have less effect on that. It'll help that out. And do your research, do your due diligence, like any purchase, like any consumer purchase. So on that one, we're going to move to our next question, which comes from David. And David says, my wife and I are mid-sized sedan people. Though we've owned a variety of SUVs, hatches, wagons, and even a couple of pickup trucks, we are recently retired and I find myself occasionally needing something more robust for summer home and yard projects, recreational outings, and winter driving. I'm looking for something 10 to 15 years old that is reliable, four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and high ground clearance, capable of towing 3,500 pounds, large boxy cargo area, all in a mid-size footprints. Your suggestions are much appreciated. David, this is one of the things that we all like. We go into our archives, we pull out our issues of Consumer Reports or our special interest publications. We go online to consumerreports.org. We go through the data, and we each come up with something totally different. I hope. Mike, what's your suggestion?
We'll find out. So my suggestion is, he didn't give us a price range, so that's a little bit difficult. But so what I would suggest is go with something like a Lexus GX. Now, the GX is basically Lexus's version of the Toyota 4Runner. The Toyota 4Runner has been very reliable over the years. The Lexus GX has been very reliable over the years. So that going in. What the GX is, basically, it's an old school body on frame, burly, tough SUV that's a little more luxurious and nicer inside than the 4Runner. And I will say that I actually have two different buddies who have recently bought old Lexus GXs specifically for using them as their second vehicle for off-roading, for going and having fun off-roading, because it is a fantastic off-road vehicle and it's typically very reliable. I did a quick search around us. I found a 2007 Lexus GX with 145,000 miles for 10,500. I wouldn't be surprised if you could find one even significantly cheaper than that if you really tried hard. So that's my suggestion.
Good one. That's big square area. I like that idea. I like that. Keith, what do you think?
So I don't want to put brush or mulch or anything in the back of a Lexus, even if it is a Lexus with 150,000 miles on it. And I looked at a couple of different choices. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to clean it afterwards.
He could use a trailer. He said he wanted to be able to tow, 3,500 pounds?
Yeah.
He could tow his all his mulch and his brush in a trailer.
Well, the 3,500 pounds is also what threw me off of most of the cars that we'd normally suggest. So, the first cars that came to mind were, Subaru Forester, Ford Flex. There are a bunch of different options here, but those don't have that towing capacity. And he said boxy cargo area. And I thought, does he want that to be enclosed or not? And I thought, well, maybe a truck with a large cab would be a good idea, but he doesn't want a full-size truck. And I thought, a Honda Ridgeline is as often an answer here at Consumer Reports, to the point where even people kind of poke fun at us a little bit for it, but
what's for lunch? Honda Ridgeline.
Exactly. But the Honda Ridgeline, you can, it wasn't as popular as some other trucks, so you can get a decent deal on it. And it's not as unwieldy as some real full-size pickups. And it also has that large cab that allows you to have that sort of enclosed space of an SUV, but you also have that open bed for stuff like mulch and branches and leaves and, camping equipment, whatever. You can put a tonneau cover on there if you really, want to have it like a full-size huge trunk. That's just, that's my idea.
That's a good one. That's good. Mm-hmm. It's
what do you got, John?
I wasn't sure about the pickup truck. I have some of the same questions. I went with a 10-year-old plus Toyota Highlander. They probably did some family duty, or they got, used pretty hard. It's not a luxury model. You're not going to necessarily say, oh goodness, that it's the past owners might have kept it in really great condition and it's got that really nice kind of wool-like carpeting or whatever. You could tow up to 5,000 pounds depending on the equipment with it. You could get them for about $9,000, according to some of the data I've seen out there. They made a lot of them. Very reliable vehicles. They're variable. They're all-wheel drive. They're not off-road 4Runner Lexus GX monsters. Totally admit that. Wasn't sure how much he needs. For solid recreational. Where they're going fire roads or ATV. Double track type of terrain. But it'll work. It's relatively square and boxy. It's not a giant footprint because those are the much older ones where they were pretty small SUVs by today's standards. So.
Right.
No, I'd say that, the 6, the 10s, the 6, 7, and 8, 08, 06, 07, 08, 09s, probably not as much with the towing capacity, but you can find some that had that. Definitely look at 10. It's a good 10 years old. The car's depreciated significantly.
Yeah.
So that brings us to our final question from Mr. Das, who says, I am in the market for a comfy commuter car and I'm looking at significantly marked down new Ford Fusions. Will this be a smart choice from a long-term reliability and comfort ride standpoint? I'll jump in on this one first. That doing some searching, I've seen some big discounts on those. You're looking $5,000 to $6,000 off on SE trims, depending on your area. That's the most common one. So a quick search finds 256 available in the immediate Consumer Reports Auto Test Center area. With those type of money off, no questions asked 2020s. So, current model year. If you're looking at an SEL, the next level up, $3,000 to $4,000. The positives, look, if it's a fun to drive vehicle from our testing, it has standard safety features, the new one, standard ADAS features. It's quiet. Negatives, mileage isn't really great. From the 1.5 liter turbocharged engine, it's actually pretty low. And check out consumerreports.org for our test results, and you'll see how it compares with other sedans like the Honda Accord, and the Toyota Camry, and even the Subaru Legacy. It does have all-wheel drive. It's one of the few non-Subarus, basically family sedans or midsize sedans that's available with all-wheel drive. The problem has been reliability is up and down. It has average reliability. Most of it's going to be in the electronics, the electrical equipment, infotainment type issues. So Is it a solid deal? Well, you know what? If you're getting $6,000 or even $7,000 off on it, and you're going to put that money aside, and you're just really going to be cruising in it, it just depends, I think, on your stomach for potentially having to take it in. A lot of electronics issues that are hard to track down, but as the fundamentals go, the car is solid. Good reliability, engine, transmission, all the trim pieces and such. I toss it out to you guys and get your opinions on it as well.
Well, honestly, you covered just about everything there, John. There isn't too much more to say. Nice job. Yeah, like you said, right now, the new model is average predicted reliability. And if you look at it since 2010, most years it's been average reliability. A couple of years it was above average, and a couple of years it was below average reliability. But the big thing with this vehicle, with the Fusion, is that it handles like a European sports sedan. It almost, it's so responsive and has such nicely weighted steering. It's almost close to sports car levels in terms of how well it tracks through corners. But as far as the fuel mileage, with the 1.5 liter turbo that we tested, the fuel mileage is way off of competitors. And honestly, by the numbers, the acceleration isn't that great either. So it's almost one of those things where once you get it up to speed, it's pretty good. And if you like going through corners, it's fantastic. But and also a lot of our testers did feel like the driving position was a bit snug, and the interior in general. It's a very nicely styled car, but that does compromise the interior room a little bit versus some of its competitors.
Yeah. Keith, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I remember when that car first came out, and it was, the family resemblance to Aston Martin, which at times was not only part of the family, but the designer was the brother, it was the Callums, and it's, wow, that's a sharp looking car, and it's aged very well, but it is aged, and that's why you're seeing big discounts on it. I think there are a couple of other vehicles you should be looking at. If it's just ride quality and reliability, you're looking at the Subaru Legacy. That is one of the best ride qualities in a sedan that we've seen outside of a luxury vehicle. And if you're looking for something with better gas mileage, and you don't need that all-wheel drive, well, the Fusion Hybrid, we're seeing that tracking at about 14% below MSRP. But in my opinion, an even better car, the Avalon Hybrid, is at 15% below MSRP. That's one of the best rides out there. The Camry Hybrid, 13% below MSRP. And honestly, if you're buying it, you're probably going to get a slightly better resale value out of that Camry Hybrid than you are out of a Fusion Hybrid anyways. So that's money that you might make up on the back end when you go to sell the car, because you basically can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with a Camry. So I wouldn't settle on the Fusion just yet unless I'm getting a screaming deal. But it's not a bad car by any means. Not a bad car by any means. But I'd consider that hybrid as well, because you might be able to get some real significant savings on that and keep the savings going. And Ford tends to package their hybrids very nicely, especially if you're going to get some luxury options anyways. The price premium might not be that great, so keep an eye out.
Excellent. Good points, everyone. I agree 100%. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Talking Cars. As always, check the show notes to see more about what we talked about in this episode. Also, keep sending us your questions, talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.